Hello and welcome to the News Review. The Iranian Foreign Ministry has dismissed as politically charged the Financial Action Task Force's decision to blacklist Iran. The ministry spokesman said the blacklisting is part of the U.S., Israeli, and Saudi political ploys and international mechanisms. Abbas Mousavi said that Iran is invulnerable to allegations of money laundering and financing terrorism and is very cooperative and transparent in these areas. He, however, said the anti-Iran move comes as Saudi Arabia and Israel are the biggest sponsors of terrorism. The FATF put Iran on its blacklist after Tehran refused to fully adopt its provisions. The Iranian authorities say that countries like the U.S. could abuse the Palermo and terrorist financing conventions for financial spying and new sanctions. Marcus Papadopoulos, publisher and editor at Politics First, joins us from London to tell us more about this. Marcus, at this point, we've had the official reaction from Iran coming and saying this is part of the plot, in part, by Saudi Arabia, the United States, and Israel to somewhat influence the decision that was made, obviously for their political gains. Do you think they have a point?
This is quite clearly a politically motivated decision designed to enable principally America, but also Israel and Saudi Arabia, not just to continue, but to strengthen their economic warfare, which they have been pursuing relentlessly and brutally against Iran for many years now. Now, turning to the current organization that has designated Iran in this most inaccurate of way, this organization, like, incidentally, Transparency International, is neither credible nor impartial. And all one needs to do to understand that it is neither credible or impartial is look at how, for example, it does not list Britain or it does not list London as the world's #1 money laundering capital in the world, which is the #1 in the world with the connivance of the British authorities. And then Britain, it does not list Britain and America as being chief principal supporters of terrorism in the world, from the Balkans to the Middle East. If we start with the Balkans, the Americans and the British finance a brutal terrorist organization there, known as the so-called Kosovo Liberation Army. If we move to Syria, the British and the Americans have financed the White Helmet, which once again is a wicked terrorist organization which has immense blood, Syrian blood, on its hands. And then the same organization does not list Saudi Arabia as being the chief financier, the chief exporter of religious extremism and terrorism in the world. So how on earth can you take this decision and the organization which has issued this decision seriously when it does not cite countries like Saudi Arabia, Britain and America as being some of the leading countries in the world when it comes to supporting, in terms of finances, terrorist organizations in the world? It is preposterous nonsense. And I might add as well that this organization is based in Paris. Well, ordinary French people need to know this, that because of Iran, because of Iran's vital contribution to the fight and destruction of ISIS in Lebanon, Syria and Iraq, French people are a lot safer on streets in towns and cities across France because of the role, the indispensable role that Iran played in destroying ISIS. Because, my word, if ISIS had been successful in Syria and Iraq and Lebanon, then the threat to ordinary people in France would be tenfold compared to what it is today.
Okay, let's dig a little deeper with you, Mustafa Khoshrez, journalist and political commentator. One of the things that came as a counter-argument to this, in terms of at least of the ones who are opposing this within Iran, is the fact that you have the U.S. that has placed the IRGC as a terrorist organization, and therefore it wants to follow what type of activities, financially speaking, the IRGC has. And it wants Iran to oblige to that. Is that a valid counter-argument? And are there other opposition factors that you can think of that makes this FATF decision controversial?
Hello, and thanks for having me. Well, let me just appreciate my colleague's comments that they were true. As a matter of fact, the United States is making an instrumental use of such organizations. In this case, of course, it's not an international, but it is an interstate body, the FATF or FATF. The United States has been using all these bodies and organizations in order to advance its goals with regard to other countries. Otherwise, they are the first to be the victim of their own rules, and they are never punished. Similar to what they did with the JCPOA, the United States defined and violated the UN Resolution 2231, but according to international rules, it was to be punished. But nobody took any action, including the UN Secretary General, that never took any action against the United States to punish us for violating the resolution. But back to your question, no, I'm sorry to say that it's wrong. As a matter of fact, those that are complying with FATF rules and regulations need to do, their FIUs or the Financial Intelligence Unit have to present the relevant data and information, and also they need to render judicial cooperation with other members of FATF or those countries that are following FATF rules and regulations with regard to the terrorist organizations that have been enlisted by the UN. In this case, the UN has only 4 terrorist organizations that need to be addressed by FATF. That includes ISIL, Daesh, the Al-Qaeda, the Al-Nusra, and another one in Nigeria also. These are the only 4 groups that are recognized as terrorist groups. Therefore, in other cases, well, nobody can refer to FATF in order to work against like IRGC or anyone else. But of course, there is a trend, there is a course of action. They could take this course of action and include the list of the SDN list of the United States, including its sanctions against the IRGC and its enlisted entities, into the similar list of FATF. FATF received the name of the terrorist group from in two ways. One is the UN, the other one is a judicial process that is possible for the US to take similar action to include IRGC in its in the list, the bad guys, the list of the bad guys of the FATF. But the reasons why Iran is resistant against this are many. I appeared in a First TV program with you earlier, and I explained a number of these reasons. According to FATF rules and regulations, Iran needs to approve Palermo and CFT. Based on Palermo, all those that are doing transactions, the recipient and the one that is doing the payment, and the people in line in the chain of this transaction, all of them should be clear and transparent. Now, considering that Iran has been, and it is still, under the harshest ever sanctions of the United States, it is bypassing the sanctions while keeping some data and transactions in the dark. If it comes to endorse Palermo and ratifies it and implements it, then it has to reveal all the data and information to FATF, and FATF is headed and chaired by Marshall Blakely, the Assistant Undersecretary of State for combating financing terrorism and money laundering. So you could easily understand that Iran's big data would be released to the United States, and that would make their sanctions much more efficient by blocking Iran's exit doors. Also, it would disclose Iran's customers. It would disclose how Iran supplies anything, especially sanctioned items or dual items and goods. Also, present and former U.S. officials in the Treasury have stressed that the best way in order to contain Iran's power components in the missile industry, as well as other high-tech areas, is forcing Tehran to endorse FATF rules and regulations, because in that case, they could trace the chain of Iranian transactions of all companies that Iran has, of all entities, the IRGC, the missile industry, high-tech industries, nano industries, satellite launch industries, and so on and so forth. And this way, they could hunt down or buy the influential scientists of Iran. This has already happened with regard to the IAEA. When Iran released the names of its most influential nuclear scientists to the IAEA leaked the information, and the Israelis, the MKO, MI6, and others came to use and pick up that information and assassinated 5-6 Iranian nuclear scientists.
Right.
So this is not something that's not going to happen. To put it in a nutshell, as my final argument here is that Iran has been trying to build up confidence through JCPOA.
Oh, looks like we lost them. Sorry about that. That was Mustafa Khoshchesh, journalist and political commentator. I think we got a gist of what he said. Also, I'd like to thank Marcus Papadopoulos, publisher and editor at Politics First. And that does it for the News Review.